Sometimes going down memory lane, a lot of times actually, it could be a lot of fun remembering old stories and things that happened in your life. And sometimes it can be bittersweet because you've totally changed and it doesn't apply to you anymore. And I think this story is going to be a little bit of both. I wanted to talk about in my former life, I used to be a poker player, pretty good one. I started in the 90s, I ended up in the 2000s, and before television kind of ruined it for everybody, in my opinion. You had to actually learn your craft, and eventually television kind of changed everything and put people more on a level playing field because they glorified the game of poker. Just wanted to share some of the stories about what happened to me, how I got into poker, and also why I left, and talk about it from just the experience of it, also from the moral reasons why I didn't have a problem with it, and why now I kind of, you know, I might have a bit of a problem with it. But I'm not here to judge you. I'm just kind of here to kind of give you my side of the story, and my side of the story can change. I mean, like, you know, I could be wrong. So in the 1990s, I saw the movie Rounders, like a lot of people did, and you know, I was already a poker player before that, back in like the early 90s and even like in the 80s, and I was always good at it. I was good at numbers, and I was good at like figuring out when to make a bet, when not to make a bet, when to fold. Really, the most important part about poker is learning to do one thing, and that is fold your hand and continue folding your hand until you have the best advantage. So I read a few books on poker. This is back in the days when it was a limit game, so we were playing, my game was 5-10 limit, and I actually watched the game at a casino for 3 months before I even played a single hand. I read about it, I understood card theory in regards to when to play a hand and what position to play a hand, when to raise, when to check raise, when to call, when to just simply check. All those sorts of things. I just started developing a pattern, and I stuck with the book because a lot of poker players, because they're getting used to their habits, they change them all the time and they get sloppy, or the ones that, you know, that play all the time, they get sloppy, and the ones that are professional, they get even better. So I was friends with a lot of professional poker players, and we all knew who was making the money, and it was a great hobby because you know, it was not there was no intent to profit. It was just basically my thing, because I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't you know, I didn't do all those things that a lot of people do, but for a hobby, I like to, you know, since I didn't spend my money on that sort of stuff, my hobby was playing cards. And so the first time I played cards, I walked out of there with $300, and some people were, when they heard it was my first time playing it, they were like, "You're a liar, you're kidding, you know, you're lying, you're a shark." I wasn't a shark. It was really the first time I was playing in a professional in a casino in that type of a manner, and not that I was a professional, I was an amateur, but I did know the game, and so I played for 12 years, and you get into a habit where you know certain people, and you know their type of habits, you know their tells, and I had a lot of tells, so I lost a lot of hands. It's not about it's not always about winning, it's about being consistent and having a budget, knowing how to spend money, knowing when to walk away from a table, because you're going to get some bad beats and you're going to beat some people that you had no business beating. That's just part of the game. It's part of the learning process. The other thing about poker is that it's one of the closest games to life that I ever played, because if you're not playing with real money, and then you have nothing to risk, and so you get to learn a little bit about yourself. Can you actually keep yourself in check emotionally to not get angry when someone beats you, or not to be upset when someone beats you, or not to get overexcited when someone beats you, to be gracious, to be learning. And I gotta tell you, not all the time was I successful at that, and that's why I find poker is a game of life, because it teaches you discipline. It also teaches you that this is a game of life, because life is a game of chances sometimes. Now, some of you, myself included, believe that not everything is by chance, and that this whole thing is done by a grand design, and I am of that opinion too. But within that grand design, there are laws of this universe, and the laws kind of tell you about that there are laws of chances that happen, and not every single time is God just going to simply come in there and just be like, well, I'm going to create a miracle for you, you're going to get this flop hand. It doesn't work that way. If you're going to play these types of games, it's about a learning process. And I think the reason why I quit playing poker is that I had already learned everything I needed to learn at that point, and I took those lessons into, you know, into other parts of my life, like a lot of other people have done as well. And so I'm going to share two stories. two hands, and one will explain how I was at the peak of my playing poker, and the hand that actually made me quit. And both hands involved one person. His name is Nick. I wrote a screenplay with him a long time ago, a terrible one. And if he ever watches this, he's a cigar smoking guy. And anyways, nice to see you. So there was a flop. The flop was 5, 6, 7, and I was in the big blind position, and Nick was a couple of seats away from me. I bet my hand because I had a open-ended straight, I open-ended straight draw, and I bet. Nick raises, and then someone else calls, and then someone raises on top of that, so you could 4-bet. This is a limit game, and I call it, and then all of a sudden Nick comes by and re-raises it, so he caps it. And so this is a big pot, and there's a lot of people involved in this pot. And the next card comes out, and it's a no-win. It's a nothing card, and so probably like a jack or something like that, or a 2. I don't really remember, but I bet again, and Nick raised. Somebody re-raised again, and so clearly some people have some hands, and I'm not going anywhere because this is a big pot, and I got pocket 8s on the straw, and the chances of anyone else having an 8 is not likely since I'm holding 2 in my hand. Nick stands up and re-raises and caps the pot, and at that point a bunch of people folded their hands, and all that was left was me and Nick. And the last card that fell down, the river card, was an 8. I have trip 8s, and I look at Nick and I bet into him. Now any 9 and any 3 would have, any 4 would have had the straight and would have beaten me. But I knew Nick, and I know how Nick plays, and I knew he had trip 6s. Why? Because you get used to people and how they play and their characteristics. So I bet into him with my trip 8s, and he called. And there it was. I handed over my trip 8s, knowing fully well he didn't have me beat. And then he showed me his trip 6s, and everybody at the table was like, "Oh!" It was a full table, and some people were like, "Man, I had a 3 or a 4 or whatever it was to make the straight. Why didn't I call it?" You didn't call because you were bullied out by the rest of us in that hand. And so it was probably one of the biggest pots in the limit game I played because it was capped all the way with everybody in the hand. And so I knew what Nick was playing at that time, and every once in a while Nick knew what I was playing, but I always had Nick's number in certain things. And fast forward to several years later, all of a sudden the game has gotten bigger. You're starting to see poker now on like the World Poker Tour and the World Series of Poker, and every day on the sports channel you're watching and seeing these people playing poker. And so people started catching up and learning the odds, and so they got to learn who's Doyle Brunson, Amarillo Slim, who's Gus Hansen, Johnny Chan, Annie Duke, all these people, Phil Ivey, they got to learn all these hands. They got to learn about odds because the computers on the screens would actually tell you what the odds were of winning a hand, how to stay in a hand, when you're pot committed, all these sorts of things. And eventually people started getting better, and so we learned the old school way. We were reading books and learning and strategies and all this sort of stuff. These people were mathematicians coming in, and just stone cold. We showed up at these games because one of the things about playing poker is that you're playing there because you're actually having a conversation with people. Like, you're folding your hand most of the time, and I used to walk in there and I usually have a book with me, or I have an audio recording with me. I used to sometimes read the Bible over there. I did a whole bunch of things, and everybody else did the exact same thing because we were all conversing, talking about the weather, talking about the latest information, talking about sports, talking about politics, talking about money, talking about the game, talking about other types of games. And I was part of that circle, and we used to be a friend, friends. The Christmas dinner thing, we'd have a poker game, and I'd bring my guitar and play. We were friends, right? So a lot of us are friends. And so Nick, at this particular point, several years later, at the end of my time playing cards, and I was a good card player, but now I wouldn't say that I'm a good card player anymore. There were people, just getting back to Nick, there were people in my life that knew not to invite me to their private poker games because they knew I would basically clean them out. And one day a friend of mine One day a friend of mine said, hey, would you finally come? We haven't invited you for years, you're gonna come? I'm like, sure, right? Like, sure, I'm not there to win your money. I'm just there to have some fun. I'm just gonna play normally, and hopefully you guys take my money, right? It wasn't a big game. They were so bad. They were so bad. I took all their money. There was nothing I could do. They were that bad. And so I apologize for that. It wasn't my intention. So going fast forwarding to the end of my career in playing poker, I say career loosely because it was a hobby with no intent to profit, but I did well at it. I had like something like Queen Jack in my hand, and there was a queen on the flop, and it was like Queen 5 7, some ridiculous flop like that. And it was myself, Nick, and another friend of ours, Georgette, whose husband was one of the first people, Norm, to teach me the game, kind of put me under the wings of the clicky people sort of thing. And it was just a game where I was checking the entire time because I figured someone might have a queen and a higher kicker. And so everyone checked, and then the next card came down, and then I bet, and then Nick called, and Georgette called, and the next card came down, and it was another simple card, and I checked. I think something paired the board, and I checked, and Nick bet, and then I called, and the entire time Nick was slow playing pocket aces. The entire time, beat me. I didn't see it coming, and it was at that point I realized I'm no longer that good anymore, and I quit playing. In the game of playing poker, I have known some people that have lost a lot and were addicted to this game. This game is a game of life, and it'll teach you that discipline. But if you're addicted and you have that gambling addiction, I'm never going to recommend you play cards. In fact, I'm never going to recommend anyone playing cards. There are other ways to learn the game of life, and I've learned that now. But back in that time, I didn't know any better. So, yeah, that's my experience playing cards. I know some people are going to be like, well, that's your experience. You know, my experience is different. Totally get that. Totally get that. And it's not like if someone ever said, well, we're going to do a charity game for some cause, if I wouldn't be a part of it. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't want to be a person that is a bad influence on people anymore. Oh, there's a seal. You know, I'm trying to make good decisions, and I already make enough bad decisions in my life, and so I don't want to influence people. I know the one thing, I had a family member who was starting to learn the game of poker and said that poker is all about lying. And poker for me was never about lying. It was about playing a game. Might have been about bluffing, but that's not lying. That's just part of the game. But when I realized that people had that type of attitude, and people today, they, you know, if you have that type of attitude, then poker's not for you, because it's just going to make you morally bankrupt. It's supposed to make you a game to actually make you learn a lot better and be a better person. And if you're already starting off like this is a game where you have to lie and cheat, it's not the game for you, because you already have a bad attitude about it. One of the very, very last times I played cards, I ended up playing at a place called River Rock, and it was in the middle of the night. I was stopping off at a night market. Unfortunately, the night market was closed because of a storm, so I was like, okay, I'll stop in here and I'll play. And I did, just to kind of catch up and see how people are doing. The old team were gone. These were younger people. This one guy basically had his computer on. He's playing rush poker, which is like you're playing a hand like every quick second, while he's playing with the dealer, while he's on his cell phone. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? It's like you're not learning anything. You're just basically a machine at that particular point, and you don't care, and you're a zombie. And that's not something that I appreciate in the game anymore. So that's kind of one of the things I learned about poker. I think poker, there's too many people that are just get sucked into this game. Like, if I were to go back to the casino I used to go to, and I go there every once in a while just to go grab some food over there. It's been a while, but you know, I'm sure I would go back there. I would still see the same people. We would still hug each other. We'd still catch up, and they still ask the same question: are you still playing anymore? And the answer is still no. I'm not playing anymore. I'll hang out with you. I'll talk to you. You know, all this sort of stuff, because I love you guys. But yeah, that's my experience with poker. So I just wanted to kind of share that. It's, you know, wanted to kind of open my heart about those sorts of things. Is there anything I'm missing about the game poker? Yeah, there's some stories like there's a bunch of, you know, there was a gang. There used to be a club over here where this will teach you a couple things. Oh, it's 7 o'clock. Everyone's saying their thanks and appreciations to all the workers that are on the front line. There was a game where there was a particular ethnic group of people that would show up, and they were all the same. They spoke a different language, and all of us would know that they were coming into the poker room, and they would have this one table set up for them, and everyone would be playing the cards, and they would bet the flop. bet the cards, bet the flop, bet the turn, and bet the river, max capping it all out. And someone would win with some stupid hand like 10-5 or something like that. And all of us are like, well, and if any of us get in this game, you just play super tight and make sure you get a good hand. But I don't think people were really paying attention to what these people were doing. Why would a whole bunch of people in the same ethnical group show up in these card rooms and not really care about who wins, be like, ah, you beat me, ah, ha, 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 ha. I mean, like, you're spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars a hand for nothing. And this is a high-stakes poker game. And so it finally dawned on me what they were doing. They were laundering their money. So there is that stuff that kind of goes on too. So if you get stuck in there and you have 9 people in a game that are laundering their money and just simply betting every single hand, they're going to win you. They're going to beat you. The odds are your pocket aces are going to get cracked because they're not going to fold their hand. Their job is simply to actually launder the money. So those are some of the things that also made me kind of get turned off from the game, because everyone's got an angle. Obviously there's people that are cheating. There's still people that do that. There's one couple that did that to a friend of mine. We knew what was going on, but we were all friends, and it wasn't exactly unethical. It was just more of a case that it didn't seem right. So I'm not blaming them, but I am kind of saying that that was questionable. Anyway, those are some of the stories of my poker career in the past. It's not a career, it's just more like a hobby. Yeah, they were good times and they were bad times, and I could share lots of stories, lots of flops. Everyone remembers the big ones. But when it all comes down to it, it's just, it was a game of life for me. I learned it, I've moved on, and maybe you will too. And maybe you might want to consider not doing it if you're listening to this video for the first time and saying, hey, I could get sucked in this game. You can get sucked in this game. If you don't have the discipline to recognize that there are things more important in this game, and if you are going out every single night and playing this game, you're addicted, you need to get out. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share. My name is Leslie Michael Jr. Thanks for listening. If you haven't done so, please like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.